Chapter 481 Angekok's True Intentions. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Everything was not as simple as it seemed. Often Max had wondered what was the reason behind Angekok taking personal interest in his training to the point where he agreed to babysit Max while he did level training on an unknown planet. He was a god, every second of his divine time was extremely valuable, which meant that the reasons behind him training Max the way he did were also massive. Max was not dumb, he understood that since Angekok was investing so much into him, the moment where he would extract his pound of flesh would come sooner or later. While if it was a request like the one Drax had given him to avenge the wrongdoer of Lord Agni, Max would have no qualms in trying his best to help Angekok, but what Max worried was that Angekok had something more sinister in mind. From the deepest corners of his gut, he felt that Angekok was aiming to permanently take over his body. That after everything Max went through, when it would be his moment to step into the domain of the gods and reach that divine realm of power. The old shaman god would ditch his own old body and take over Max's, which he had carefully nurtured ever since he was tier 3. This fear often kept Max up at nights, as there was nothing more scary than the thought of being a conscious puppet in one's own body. His dearest friend Sebastian had undergone that experience once in his lifetime, and according to his accounts, Max knew he could not let something similar happen to himself. The second fear that Max had was that Angekok was raising him as a weapon. Blood shamans could manifest, it was one of their inherent basic skills, and Max did not understand the clear extents to which this skill applied. However, when Angekok explained this portion to him, there was an uncanny shine in his eyes that might look the same to even his wife, but it was a subtle change that Max had caught on to. Max had seen that look often, it was one of the give-ways of his brother when he was luring his opponents knowingly into a trap, which was exactly how Max felt as he debated the consequences of relinquishing control of his body as Angekok had planned. "I don't have a good feeling about this, Grandpa Drax, what do you think I should do?" Max questioned the old AI in his mind. "There's nothing you can do, Max, I'm sorry boy, despite everything you have achieved so far, in front of those purple eyes you are nothing but an ant. There is no plan to be made, there is no decision to be had. Angekok has spoken, it's either compliance or death. Either way, if he wants to use your body and skills, he would have ways to extract them from your corpse as well. So you have to comply boy, no doubt you have to," Drax said as he reminded Max that despite the glaring red flags and his personal overthinking on the matter, in the end there was nothing to be done even if Angekok did want to toy with his body. "Gnav Om, O Holy One, the progenitor of all shamans, your descendants call for your help. In exchange for my vitality, my mana and my vigor, grant me your immense powers, for my enemies need to be destroyed. Heed my call, for I know your name, Angekok, the shaman god, the enslaver of the Kraken, and the slayer of the sea god Poseidon. Heed my call." Max said the incantation to summon Angekok as instantly half his HP, MP and SP bar was sacrificed to Angekok. His consciousness felt like it was pulled into another dimension as he saw Angekok's gigantic form once again. Max always had his doubts as to whether or not this small body of the shaman god was his real body, but after today's experience he could tell that it was not. Although it was a fleeting moment of time when their eyes met, with his heightened understanding of the element of fire, Max could feel the heat emanating from Angekok's real form. The god was as big as a city and was probably 1/10 the temperature of the sun. After that fleeting moment, Max found himself back in the familiar white space of nothingness as he waited for 5 minutes to pass peacefully. Angekok's POV, Max's fears were right. Angekok did have ulterior motives that were by no means noble. As Max ceded the control of his body, Angekok focused on the delicate task he had been preparing for so long. Planting an undetectable spell within Max's very soul. The spell, carefully crafted and woven into the fabric of Max's essence, would remain dormant and hidden, only to be triggered when Angekok deemed the time to be right. To accomplish this, Angekok had spent countless years studying and perfecting the art of soul manipulation. It was a dangerous and forbidden practice, one that even the most daring gods dared not dabble in. But for his grand plan, Angekok was willing to take the risk. He knew that if he could successfully plant the spell within Max, he would have the perfect vessel to fulfill his ambitions. That he would be able to overcome his limitations and one day become a celestial. Nobody guided him while he was a young mortal, and by the time he discovered the truth about the celestials and the only pathway to break past Tier 8, it was already too late. His foundations had long stabilized and it was impossible to deviate from his path. Even though he wielded the Time Stone, a Tier 10 treasure, it was not possible for him to reverse time itself even with its help, which left Angekok with no means to step past his boundaries. This was why he went into hibernation for thousands of years, trying to come up with a way to step past his limits as he created this spell. When he was eventually woken up by Max, he coincidentally also found the perfect candidate to complete his plans, as it seemed like destiny had picked him to be a doll for his purpose. Angekok focused his divine energies and channeled them into the depths of Max's soul, meticulously weaving the spell, ensuring it was flawlessly integrated into Max's essence. He had confidence that Benyuga herself would not be able to detect its presence. The spell was designed to activate when Max reached his peak potential. At that moment, he would be able to assume control over Max's body and mind, effectively becoming the puppet master, while Max's consciousness would be relegated to a mere spectator, trapped within his own body. Angekok knew that the boy did not fully trust him, he knew that the boy was wary of him, but it did not matter. By the time he would realize that Angekok meant him harm, it would all be too late. Once the spell was successfully planted, Angekok withdrew his divine energies from Max, leaving no trace of his manipulation as he continued his dexterity training as promised and created hundreds of exploding dolls that were the shaman substitute of bombs. By the time Max woke up, his dexterity stat had increased by +5 points and his arms and legs felt extremely sore. However, he was none the wiser about the trickery performed by Angekok on his soul. /////A/N. This bonus chapter is sponsored by patron Alcat_Gaming, please thank him in the comments for this one /////. Chapter 482 Not Special. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Max frowned deeply as he sat in a pool of poison. Why is it that every few days I find myself in a situation where my body is subjected to mind-numbing pain? Max wondered as he could not help but feel slightly depressed at his life choices. Ever since he had decided to defy his destiny and live his second life to the fullest, he had often found himself in situations where his body was subjected to an unimaginable degree of torture that could scar one's soul for several reincarnations. Every time that he thought that he would never have to go through something so horrifying again, fate slapped him with an upgraded version of torture that made the previous experience feel like a field trip. If fate was a person, Max could imagine him laughing at his misery as the moment he overcame a miserable experience, fate seemed to plan to send him to the next. Although he had intermediate poison resistance, and the external touch of poison was not as bad as ingesting it, the experience of sitting in a pool filled with some of the most potent toxins in the universe was by no means pleasant. Max clenched his fists and gritted his teeth as the venomous liquid seeped into every crevice and pore of his body. The toxins assaulted his senses, sending wave after wave of excruciating pain coursing through his veins. Sweat beaded on his forehead, mingling with the poisonous fluid as it continued to assault his body. However, as miserable as the experience was, Max knew the torment was necessary for him to improve his endurance. He had come to understand that the poison he was submerged in had a unique property. It stimulated the body's natural ability to adapt and evolve, in turn, boosting the endurance stat. As the minutes ticked by, Max's mind began to drift to the vacation he had just days ago, the pleasant time spent soaking in a hot spa and undergoing massage while talking about nothing in particular, versus his pitiful condition today. His body, pushed to the brink, began to turn purple under the poison. Cells and tissues ravaged by the poison worked tirelessly to repair themselves, becoming more robust and resilient in the process. The constant assault of the toxins forced his body to adapt, growing stronger and more resistant to the venomous assault. System notification. Endurance +1, the system notification was the only reason behind why Max was even moderately fine with this gruesome routine, as he found slight happiness at the thought that he was growing stronger through the torture. Stop daydreaming and inspect the memory packet I have left for you. It's a scene from my personal life. One of my first fights against 300 knights as a Tier 4 blood shaman. It will take your mind off the pain and help you gain insights which will boost your intelligence stat, Angakok said as he reminded Max that he was not supposed to let his thoughts stray while sitting in the poison pool but rather focus on improving his intelligence stat. As Max accessed the memory packet left by Angakok, the scene unfolded before his eyes as if he was watching an immersive movie. He found himself standing on a vast battlefield, the air heavy with the scent of blood and steel. The sky overhead was filled with menacing dark clouds, casting an eerie shadow over the landscape. In the center of the battlefield stood Angakok, his dark robes billowing in the wind. The powerful blood shaman emanated an air of confidence and power, his eyes burning with determination. Surrounding him were 300 knights clad in shining armor, their swords shimmering with magical energy. With a wicked grin, Angakok raised his hands and began to chant in an ancient language. The ground beneath him trembled, and dark tendrils of blood emerged from the earth, writhing and twisting like serpents. The knights, sensing the danger, charged towards him, their magical swords leaving trails of blazing energy in the air. Unfazed by the oncoming threat, Angakok unleashed his blood magic, commanding the tendrils to lash out at the knights. The blood whips sliced through the air with a vicious speed, shattering the knights' magical swords and sending them flying backward. Each time a tendril struck, it drained the vitality from the knights, their armor turning dull and lifeless as their strength withered away. Max was in utter disbelief as he saw this fight sequence. This was a form of blood manipulation, a skill he believed to be unique to his bloodline. As the battle continued, Angakok displayed a mastery of blood magic that left Max in awe. He summoned a storm of razor-sharp blood shards that rained down upon the knights, piercing their armor with absolute precision and draining their life essence. The battlefield soon became a grisly scene of devastation, with bodies strewn about and the earth stained a deep crimson. When the last of the knights fell, Angakok stood unscathed amidst the carnage. The blood shaman had not even broken a sweat, his mastery over his dark powers so complete that he had managed to defeat 300 knights without receiving so much as a scratch. After the scene was over, Max was thrown out of the memory packet as he looked at Angakok with a sense of awe and disbelief. That's right, boy, while you can manipulate blood and use it as an extension of your own body, you are not the only one in the universe with the ability to use blood magic. I cannot absorb it like you can, neither can I manipulate any blood source like you. But just like Thor's descendants have a natural inclination to lightning, but doesn't mean that you as a vampire can't cast Thunder Blast. If you have learnt the move, I can cast blood magic although I'm not a primordial vampire. While you are inherently capable of casting a superior form of blood manipulation, as a blood shaman, there are still various blood spells you can learn to rain terror on any battlefield you walk on. Now go, inspect that memory packet again and again and again until you learn to cast the 2 spells I used inside that with at least basic proficiency. I've butchered a few beasts in the surroundings for you. There should be fresh blood dripping for you to use. Start now because you only have until the cooldown period of the summoning ends before the second round of memory packet begins. Angakok said as he tried to break and motivate Max at the same time. Break him to remind him that he was not special by being able to cast blood magic and motivate him by showing the skills he could master if only he worked hard on it. Max gritted his teeth and nodded, determined to make the most of this opportunity. He would not let Angakok show him down over the one thing he was proud to be a master of. Immersing himself once more into the memory packet, he paid close attention to every detail of Angakok's movements and incantations, determined to master the 2 spells the blood shaman had demonstrated. Chapter 483 Sebastian's Choice. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In a blink of an eye, 14 days passed by quickly as Max hit stat maximization for his endurance stat and was no longer forced to sit in horrendous poison baths. As a result of the grueling training, not only did he maximize his endurance stat but also gained high poison resistance. His dexterity stat had also been improving very fast, with Angekok managing to improve its value by +3 to +5 on a daily basis, pushing it close to stat maximization as well. Doviko Max knew that if there was one stat he was particularly bad with, it was the dexterity stat, and understood that should he have tried to maximize it on his own, he would have probably gained stats at the rate of +1 a week maybe, and would have taken a year at minimum to hit maximization. In comparison, his intelligence stat was lagging a bit, improving only at the rate of +2 to +4 a day, but it did not bother Max too much as he did learn 3 new attack spells as a result of the memory dive, while learning a lot of new information about blood shamans, the races of the universe and their weaknesses, and other foundational stuff that supplemented the gaps in his understanding of various concepts. Although he was a bit sour about Angekok having the ability to perform blood magic, after learning his moves Max understood that the powers he had were nothing to be envious about. The 3 moves that he learnt were, Blood Tendrils, Blood Rain Cutter, Blood Quicksand, and while these moves used blood as their principal component, they were pretty much just modified spells that existed normally in nature. The Blood Tendrils spell, which was the move he saw in the memory packet as Angekok split apart the earth to summon a giant tendril to pierce his opponents, was a move that was derived from the earth magic spell, Wood Tendril, and modified to be more deadly. Similarly, the Rain Cutter was a modified Wind Cutter spell of the wind element, whereas the Quicksand was a modified spell of the nature element where one could turn any solid ground into a quicksand to trap thousands of soldiers. While Max could not convert solid ground into quicksand, with this spell he could convert pools of blood into quicksands, which was a great ability to learn for large-scale battles. The main difference between Max casting these moves and Angekok doing the same was like heaven and earth. Not only was the mana expenditure for Max 1/100th of what Angekok needed to expend to cast the same spell, the mastery level of these spells was raised to advanced for Max after only casting them all a few dozen times. These were the spells he was built for, and they resonated with his bloodline ability, making it extremely easy for him to master them. Meanwhile, Sebastian, on official papers, Sebastian was currently out on an adventure with Max. Nobody could know that Lord Raven Bloodfall was missing from action, which is why the cover that he was on an adventure with Sebastian was a must. Although it was a lot of burden, since he could not be identified alone. It was also the first time in a long time that Sebastian was out on his own with a chance to grow stronger. The legend that he was currently chasing was that of a Tier 7 necromancer who had sealed all of his powers within a single ring called the Ring of Undead, a semi-divine treasure that allowed anyone to utilize the necromancer's powers as long as they had the mana to feed the ring. The necromancer had perished 600 years ago inside a dark faction planet, and most of his facilities were raided in the years since in hopes of finding this ultimate ring. While other treasures were obtained, nobody was able to find the Ring of Undead itself, and over the years the existence of the ring had become an urban myth. Luckily, Sebastian had stumbled on a secret map that was folded inside an erotic magazine he bought from a street vendor, which seemed to point out the exact location of the treasure on a certain dark faction planet that did not seem to exist officially on any maps of the universe. The map led him to a dark faction planet called Gravethorn, a barren world shrouded in mystery and hidden from common knowledge. Gravethorn was protected by a powerful spell, making it invisible to the untrained eye. It was said that only those with a true calling and an innate connection to the necromantic arts could find it. The planet was filled with dangerous creatures and treacherous terrain. To make matters worse, the planet's atmosphere was saturated with dark energy, which was toxic to most living beings. Only those with a natural resistance to dark energy could survive on Gravethorn for an extended period. By the description, it was exactly the kind of planet that Sebastian the Coward would never dare set a foot on, but after mulling over the potential to find a semi-divine treasure that would make him a much more formidable fighter than he was. Plus having a certain degree of confidence in his teleportation escape arts to avoid danger, Sebastian decided to take the risk and try his luck to obtain the treasure from the hidden planet, but first he decided to take his tier promotion test and be promoted to Tier 4 power level. He had reached the Tier 4 threshold much later than his other friends because he was usually caught up with government work or was unable to level up as fast as them when he did go out monster hunting in the wild because of his build. This was also one of the reasons why Sebastian absolutely felt that he needed to try his hand at getting this ring because it was the only way he could stay a relevant member of the group, which was filled with monsters like Max, Anna and Asiva. //////A/N Bonus chapter for hitting grow a tree target, good job everyone /////. Chapter 484 An invaluable lesson. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The memory fragment that Angekok had provided Max with today was a special one. The shaman god's greatest accomplishment seemed to come from the fact that he had killed the sea god Poseidon and enslaved his pet beast the Kraken. This feat was a part of the chant that was used to summon him, and today it was a small figment of that battle that he had decided to share with Max. Once Max delved into the memory packet, he seemed to be in the middle of the ocean, for as far as his eye could see there was only water with a small island not more than a few hundred meters in length, being the only piece of land all around. The sun seemed to be dipping below the horizon, painting the sky in a breathtaking tapestry of oranges and reds as it gave way to twilight. Waves lapped gently against the shoreline, the salty sea breeze carrying with it the scent of distant lands. The moon, a silvery crescent, began to ascend in the sky, casting its ethereal light upon the restless ocean. Angekok, the mighty shaman god, stood atop a towering cliff, his eyes fixed upon the horizon. His long, flowing robes rustled in the wind, adorned with runic symbols written in a language that Max could not understand. He looks handsome. I thought he was always as boring as he is now, Max thought as he continued watching patiently. The air around Angekok hummed with energy as if nature itself was bending to his will. A newly ascended Tier 8 god was here on Poseidon's home planet to challenge his hegemony and settle old grudges. Far below, the sea foamed and churned, as if anticipating the battle that was about to unfold. Suddenly, the tranquility of the scene was shattered by a deafening roar that echoed across the vast expanse of water. The ocean swelled, and from its depths emerged Poseidon, the formidable sea god. A great, spiraling whirlpool formed around him as he rose, the waters parting to reveal the mighty figure clad in shimmering armor, his trident gleaming ominously. Beside him, the Kraken emerged, a monstrous leviathan that dwarfed even the largest of ships. Its colossal tentacles writhed and coiled, causing the waters to froth and boil in their wake. Its eyes, like burning embers, blazed with fury and loyalty to its master. Whoa, that's the real Kraken. It's much more impressive than the one Vice Guildmaster Karna had in Omega, Max thought as he marveled at the size and power of the Kraken. Water was literally boiling around its body, the aura it exuded enough to paralyze even Tier 4 warriors with fear. Angekok raised his arms towards the sky, and the heavens responded. Dark clouds gathered, blotting out the stars and plunging the world into shadow. The fuck, the guy casually blotted all light out. I can't see shit anymore, Max swore as he could not comprehend the ability needed to completely plunge a planet into darkness. Just as Max thought he would see nothing more than flashes of attacks used from here on forward, the Kraken suddenly began glowing with a white moonlight shade, showing bioluminescent properties. Of course the terrifying monster is a glow lamp, I should have known, Max thought as he clapped his hands and prepared to watch the epic battle unfold. Poseidon, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, grinned malevolently as he met the shaman god's gaze. The two divine beings stared each other down, the tension between them palpable, like a bowstring pulled taut. The first move was yet to be made, each god assessing the other, their strategies formulating in the silence that preceded the storm. It was Poseidon who struck first, thrusting his trident into the sea. The ocean roared in response, and it seemed like the entire sea had split into two, as two towering waves about 100 meters high came towards the cliff where Angekok stood from both sides, threatening to engulf him in their watery embrace. Angekok, unperturbed by this, just casually flicked his wrists and the two massive waves coming towards him turned into a rain of harmless flowers. Max, who watched this scene, grabbed his own face tightly and stared in disbelief. The power that Prime Angekok had was next level. As the rain of flowers cascaded around him, Angekok locked eyes with Poseidon, a wry smile playing on his lips. The sea god's expression darkened, his pride seemed to have been wounded by the shaman god's effortless display of power. "Don't be too smug, boy, I'll send your ass packing just like I did to your father," Poseidon said as he commanded the kraken to attack. The monstrous beast roared, its glowing tentacles cutting through the darkness like ethereal whips. The ocean surged around the creature as it propelled itself towards Angekok with frightening speed. Angekok, still calm and collected, raised his hands to the sky, summoning a gale of wind that swirled around him like a tornado. The kraken's tentacles collided with the vortex, the force of the wind shredding through its outer layers and sending the beast recoiling in pain. Max watched in awe as the shaman god demonstrated his mastery over the elements. Poseidon, enraged by his pet's injury, unleashed a barrage of water spikes, each one as sharp and deadly as a spear. The sea god's control over the ocean was precise and devastating, the spikes hurtling towards Angekok with unerring accuracy. Undeterred, Angekok conjured a wall of ice, in an attempt to intercept the deadly projectiles. However, a colossal wave crashed into the ice wall out of nowhere, severely damaging it before the torrent of spikes destroyed it and hit Angekok's armor, causing him to take some damage. Max could hardly believe the spectacle unfolding before his eyes. The raw power and skill displayed by both gods were unlike anything he had ever witnessed. Just as he was getting really into the fight, feeling his blood pump with the most primal rush, the memory fragment ended as Max was ejected out of the loop. Devastated, Max glared at Angekok in a moment of raw emotion, but the shaman god's cold gaze jolted him back to reality, as he quickly lowered his glare and pretended to enjoy the beautiful surrounding scenery. "That memory fragment you saw was playing out at a roughly 20 times slower rate than the normal flow of time. Had it been at the normal speed, you would not be able to make heads and tails of the fights going on," Angekok said as he tried to educate Max the best way he could. "What did you make of that battle?" Angekok asked Max, hoping to hold a candid discussion to spark his learning. "Well, you definitely looked very strong back then, and Poseidon seemed to say something about killing your father, so I'm sorry for your loss," Max said, scratching his head as Angekok sighed in disappointment. After Tier 7, the landscape of battles shifts significantly. Once Godhood is achieved and an individual is capable of manipulating divine essence, in a way she becomes powerful enough to rip apart planets at will. If you let any god at Tier 6 land an open shot on any other god at Tier 6, she will kill them with a single attack, there is no question about it. Divine essence is essentially a cheat, anyone who can wield it can use it to fuel ridiculous spells that they could never hope of conjuring with normal mana. Everyone becomes extremely powerful and has the power to hurt their opponents, so the battles at that level are often decided by the moves in one's arsenal. The physical prowess, the intellectual prowess, strategy, defense, everything becomes secondary. The most important thing is the ability under one's belt and their mastery over it. It doesn't matter how fast I am. In the memory fragment you inspected, which was 20 times slower than reality, there were 2 occasions where evading a spell was impossible for me. I could not have outrun the attack where Poseidon chose to crash the 2 colossal waves into me, and I could not have dodged his precise barrage. At that moment it did not matter what my agility stat was or what my physical or constitution stat was. If the move crashed into me and Poseidon was able to drag me into the bottom of the ocean, I would have died in that battle. At that level, the only thing that can counter a spell is another spell. And it's not just the spell itself that matters, but also one's mastery over it. At your level right now, it seems like using a Tier 4 spell is always better than a Tier 3 spell, and that's all you focus on. But when it's a battle of split seconds, the casting time difference between a spell that you have, intermediate, mastery over and a spell you have, advanced, mastery over is like heaven and earth and can decide whether or not you live or die. Having a lot of spells is not as important as mastering a few trusty ones, but also if you have too few spells you will eventually be outmatched and outmuscled. The point I'm trying to make here is that you need to be very careful from here on out about the attacks you want to include in your arsenal. If the attack is something you can't master or practice again and again to raise its mastery, then it will betray you once you step into the domain of the gods. The ice wall I made in that battle that was pierced, was a move I had only advanced mastery over, but had I perfected it, I would have never been hit by Poseidon, Angekok said as he gave Max an invaluable lesson about the fight at the level of gods. While he had his own motivations behind shaping Max properly, the advice he gave him today was worth its weight in gold. Chapter 485 A Ritual. You are listening at novelfull.audio. 20 days after Max's training began, Max's mind was a little relieved and a little worried at the same time. Just as Angekok had expected, exactly on day 20 Max had managed to maximize all of his stats except agility. The poison baths had helped maximize endurance. Angekok had completed the dexterity stat maximization personally, and the memory packets he left in Max's mind helped Max rapidly absorb years' worth of knowledge in mere days, helping him reach maximization for intelligence stat right on day 20. Max could not believe his own eyes when he glanced at his stat panel that looked nothing like what it used to a mere few days ago and had undergone a 180 degrees transformation when it came to stats. Before meeting Angekok he had believed that it would take him 3.5 years to reach maximization of all stats at minimum, but in just 2 months of training with the shaman god he had managed to maximize 5 out of 6, leaving only the agility stat to master. The last 2 months were by no means a pleasant experience, but Max had grown and learnt a lot in the time period. The adversities that Angekok had subjected him to had helped him grow significantly. However, he had now hit the roadblock. Angekok's help was ending here, and somehow he needed to figure out a method to maximize his agility stat in the next 10 days. Max had an inkling that Angekok had left hints on how to achieve this in the memory packets he had been showing Max over the past 20 days, but it was up to him to piece it all together and apply it to reality. As Max pondered on the subject seriously, he understood that the method of training physically for it was out of the question. If he was lucky, 10 days of intense training would help increase his agility stat by +2 to +3 points, which was nowhere near the speed at which he needed to improve. This meant that he needed to find extraordinary means to improve himself that were unconventional. If there was one thing about the shaman class that stood apart from the rest, it was the fact that it had a lot of unconventional methods to make its practitioners self-reliant. It had a method to replace potions, it had a method to replace the need for tools and weapons, and it had a method to make a bootleg of pretty much every spell in nature. In Angekok's memory fragments there seemed to be a method which was quite like the draconification process that Max had undergone, but yet much different. It was a method to alter one's physical abilities, and Max had watched as to how Angekok used it to strengthen his bones in one of the memory packets, as he wondered if he could use the same strategy to strengthen his muscles and by extension improve his agility stat. Once he arrived at this line of thought, he shifted through some other memories and formulated a theory. The more Max thought about it, the more excited he got, as he soon realized that this was exactly the line of thought that Angekok had left for him, because it seemed like he had purposefully shown Max his battle with the mythical creature Gryphalos that happened on this very planet for this very reason. Gryphalos was a mythical creature who was a fast mount capable of traveling through space, a one-of-a-kind beast that went extinct after excessive hunting during the Chaos Era War. The beast possessed the body of a lion, the wings of an eagle, and the nimble reflexes of both predators, a legendary mythical creature revered for its astonishing speed, agility, and nimbleness. In Angekok's memory fragment he seemed to have hunted a Gryphalos on this very planet near a small creek, and when Max tried to locate the spot he found the exact location that looked precisely the same from his memory, although thousands of years had passed. As long as he could locate the exact location of the beast's death, he could summon its spirit for the ritual that Angekok had shown him, and since he was able to locate the precise position, this problem seemed to have been solved. Now Max was even more sure that Angekok wanted him to proceed with this method and had purposefully left clues for him to figure out. Assured, Max began looking for the herbs and other essentials he would need to perform the ritual to invoke its spirit and then consume its essence to improve his own muscles for enhanced agility. The ritual was complex and would need Max to draw a lot of intricate arrays using special ingredients, taking maybe 6.7 days to complete. But once done, Max was sure it would help him achieve the much-desired stat maximization. Angekok offered Max no guidance on whether or not his approach was correct, but watched patiently as Max danced to his arrangements just as he wanted him to. Meanwhile Sebastian's ship hovered just outside the eerie atmosphere of the ugly Gravethorn planet. For a fleeting moment, Sebastian had questioned the authenticity of the map he had discovered, wondering if he was being led on a wild goose chase in search of a hidden treasure trove. From afar, the planet was virtually imperceptible, reflecting no light despite being situated in a binary sun-solar system, and it wasn't until Sebastian's ship approached within 100 kilometers of the planet's atmosphere that an arcane veil, a concealment spell, was lifted, unveiling the presence of Gravethorn planet. Under ordinary circumstances, Sebastian would have plunged headfirst into the unknown without hesitation. However, there was something deeply unsettling about the appearance of this peculiar planet. The entire world was shrouded in an ominous, monochromatic palette. The ocean waters appeared as a lifeless, murky gray, while the land and terrain bore shades of oppressive blackness. Even the vegetation seemed like grotesque, withered husks of once vibrant trees, evoking an aura of unease that haunted any who dared to gaze upon them. It was a paradise for necromancers, but a place that instinctively repulsed cowards like Sebastian. "Oh Master Kremeth, what all must I do just to become powerful? Why can't I just steal a few treasures from you and live a good life while eating your hand-cooked meals? I'm sorry, I miss you. Please take me back," Sebastian cried out loud as he knew nobody was currently hearing his childish tantrum, before steeling his resolve and slowly descending into the planet's atmosphere. Chapter 486 A Ritual, 2, You are listening at novelfull.audio. Max knew that the ritual he was about to perform was not only complex but also extremely dangerous. It was a forbidden soul magic, a power that even the most skilled gods dared not to dabble in. This type of magic delved into the very essence of a creature's soul, and any mistake could lead to catastrophic consequences. Although he understood that it was dangerous, he did not understand the exact level of danger associated with this magic. The longer duration for which one was dead, the easier the ritual became, since the spirit's connection to the body waned. Hence the ritual that Max was about to perform was about as safe as it could get, with thousands of years having passed since the death of the Griffalos. Had Angekok not given him the memory fragment and maintained the conditions on his planet exactly the same even after thousands of years, not letting the terrain change even the slightest, Max would have never found the location for the Griffalos' death, having no chance to perform the ritual. As the days passed, Max tirelessly collected the necessary herbs and rare ingredients required for the ritual as he scoured Angekok's planet looking for them one by one. He also studied the memory fragments in depth to ensure that he had a thorough understanding of the process he was about to undertake. After collecting all the rare herbs, Max carefully began drawing the complex arrays that would serve as the foundation for the ritual, with a peculiar blue flower that smelled fruity but left small crystals on the ground when rubbed against it. On the 7th day, Max finally completed drawing the last array. It took him several redraws to get the lines perfectly parallel to one another, as despite Angekok helping him immensely with his dexterity stat, he was still a bit clumsy when executing on his own. Once the drawing was complete, Max threw a glance at Angekok. The shaman god was looking down on him from a nearby tree branch with his ominous purple eyes with an expressionless face that did not indicate anything. Max took it as a positive sign. He was inclined to believe that the shaman god would step in and help if his life was ever in danger. This assumption was not because he believed in Angekok's kindness as a mentor, but because he was sure that whatever plans Angekok had for him involved him being alive to fulfill its purpose. Max started to power the array. There were two ways to do it. One was to pour in his own mana and the other was to use high-grade mana stones. Max would have undoubtedly went the mana stone way should he have the option, but he did not exactly have a store to purchase them on this planet, while his own personal inventory only had 3 of them, which were not enough to power the array. Each section of the array needed about 80 units of mana to power it, and in total there were 4,000 sections to be powered, bringing the mana total to 320,000 units. This was about what Max could manage with his mana stat currently sitting at 335,000, but the slightest wastage would lead to a failure. Calming his breathing and concentrating on pouring the mana, Max began lighting up the arrays one after another, which glowed with a dark purple hue, the same as Angekok's eyes. Max had to focus channeling his mana perfectly in very thin lines as he slowly lit up more and more of the 4,000 arrays. Once more than 3,600 arrays had been lit, something stirred at the center of the ritual circle as the spirit of the dead Griffalos was being forcefully pulled out of the underworld where it had been living peacefully for thousands of years and was being forced back into the world of the living. The purple of the array turned into a smoky black, as the temperature around Max dropped to an icy cold. Goosebumps arose on the primordial vampire's skin, as he had a foreboding of meeting something ominous. Not losing focus, Max continued to push through, trying to complete lighting up all the arrays as an elemental spirit was summoned belonging to the Griffalos as Max saw the outline of the mythical beast which had been extinct for centuries now. Had the beast died recently and its connection to its physical body in the world of living be still strong, it would have escaped Max's ritual and became an undead. However, because its physical body had long decayed to nothing and not even its bones left, it had no anchor in this world. Max chanted an ancient draconic as he commanded the Griffalos to dissolve into a pool of essence for him to consume, as he controlled the array to create a torrent of wind that would suck the spirit into the bottle of boiling potion he had prepared before the ritual. The spirit tried to resist Max's arrangement and desperately tried to shrug free from its predicament, but it found itself powerless in the real world as it was slowly dragged into the potion bottle against its will and its spirit essence dissolved within the boiling liquid. Max was covered in sweat by this point. The ritual had taken a lot of focus and concentration on his part and had completely drained him of his mana, but despite the exertion he slowly walked into the array and picked up the newly made potion. Taking a glance at Angekok, who did nothing to stop him, Max drank the potion in one gulp as he felt every centimeter of the boiling liquid's journey inside his internal tract, from his neck all the way to his stomach. The potion was rapidly absorbed by his gut and absorbed into his bloodstream as Max's internal temperature rose rapidly. Max felt like he had just drunk a vial of concentrated acid that was destroying his body from the inside out. However, with the improved knowledge about the fire element due to his meeting with the Phoenix, Max was able to get rid of the excess heat in his body as he redirected it precisely through his arms to the ground below. The potion began showing its effects as it seeped into Max's muscles, coating them with a layer of protection and lubrication that made them more resilient towards wear and tear and more capable of absorbing shocks. System notification. Agility +1, system notification. Agility +1, system notification. Agility +1, system notification. Agility +1, Max's agility stat rose rapidly, as the rock beneath his hands began melting to a pool of liquid, looking like it were lava from the heat generated in the process. At this point in time Max had no doubt in his mind he would have all the blood in his body evaporated and him dead if he did not learn the nuances of thermoregulation from the Phoenix. The process of absorbing the potion was much more difficult than what Angekok had made it to be from his memory fragment, and had Max been a normal shaman he would have died from it a dozen times by now. Gritting his teeth, Max glared at Angekok with anger and had expected the blood shaman god to be as expressionless as ever, but he was not. There was a smug smile plastered over his face as he watched Max's misery with pleasure. He knew, Max thought as he gnashed his teeth even harder and let out a primal grunt, the anger helping him numb the pain he was currently feeling as his body absorbed the potion even more. Eventually, after 20 minutes of intense struggle, Max had fully absorbed the potion and had barely reached stat maximization. His body was a sizzling mess as water vapor from the grass underneath and his own sweat sizzled over his hot skin as he laid exhausted on the floor, his eyes dozing in and out of consciousness. He wished to move, however, none of his muscles were responding to his will at the moment as the slight attempt to get back on his feet sent him down the spiraling darkness of unconsciousness. He had blacked out from the exertion of the experience. Angekok clapped his hands in amusement once Max was out cold as he slinged his unconscious body over his shoulder and began exiting the planet that he created inside his space bubble. His destination. The place where Max would be able to attempt his tier promotion. Chapter 487 Unique Methods. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Max woke up at the bottom of a lake. Naturally, as any individual would be, he was startled to see that he was surrounded by water and not air as his survival reflexes kicked in, and he immediately held his breath as his heart rate spiked. "Calm down, boy, you are in a safe environment," a deep primal voice that Max recognized to be Angekok sounded in his ears as he calmed down a little and realized that he had a peculiar seaweed sticking out of his mouth which was helping him breathe at the bottom of this lake. Max surveyed his surroundings. There were no fishes around him but only peculiar glowing yellow plants that were pulsating a calm beam of light at regular intervals. "Where am I?" Max wondered as he felt like he was in some extremely mystical place. The place where he was seated was unusually calm to the point where it was eerie. There was not the slightest waves inside this lake, not even a slight ripple, as everything seemed harmonious. There were only the plants and him who was seated in the eye of some mystical ancient formation. "I'll be damned, this is the Lake of Enlightenment." Drax shouted excitedly in Max's mind as he recognized this place instantly. This is the ancient place where only the most privileged came to be promoted to Tier 5 before the system took over the universe. These plants around you are special, they hum rhythmically with the profundities of the universe exactly 108 times a minute. Lord Agni became a Tier 5 powerhouse at this very spot. Drax explained as Max understood the situation he was in. He had passed out after completing stat maximization of the agility stat, and since all of his stats had been maximized and it was time for him to go attempt the promotion test, Angekok took it upon himself to save time and abduct him to the bottom of this lake. Max had begun to really dislike Angekok's approach. The shaman god was too cold. He was calculative with every word he said, and despite offering Max some sound advice from time to time, it was clear that he was on some sort of a tight schedule, and Max improving rapidly was one of his agenda. Not only did he have no regard for Max's personal safety or well-being, from the evil grin he displayed while Max suffered from the effects of absorbing the spirit of the Griffalos, it was clear that he was fully aware of the dangers of the ritual and that it held considerable danger to Max's life, but chose to not warn him beforehand deliberately. The only question now was why. Why did he want him to improve, and so fast at that? Why was a god that had lived thousands of years suddenly worried about wasting a few extra days? It made no sense, and every day his behavior made Max grow more and more wary of his motives. This sort of attention from the cold-blooded god could only mean there was something seriously messed up in store for him in the future. Close your eyes, boy, and start circulating your mana in cycles inside your own body, following the longest path you can find in your own mana circuit. About one day into this process you will enter a deep meditative state that will trigger your tier promotion test. Although, I would have loved for you to stay out of the Queen's influence, it seems like she has taken over this place as well, so once you enter a comprehensive state, she will most likely send you a system notification. Angekok said as he informed Max about what he needed to do next. Max did not like being pushed around like this, but there was nothing he could do in this situation except comply. Swallowing his anger as a bitter pill, Max closed his eyes and began circulating his mana within his own circuits as per Angekok's instructions. The process was boring and it was easy to be distracted midway, but thankfully he had Drax who kept his mind from straying away to useless things and helped him focus on the cycle. It was going to be a long next 24 hours for the primordial vampire. Meanwhile Sebastian, after landing on Gravethorn, Sebastian immediately regretted ever deciding to come on this mission. The planet was a freaking monster map with all sorts of exotic undead that he had never even heard about, like mutated Durahals, giant skeletons, and six-legged nether beasts at tier 4 strength and above roaming throughout the planet. Thankfully I had the good sense of promoting myself to tier 4 before I came to this planet. Even the mob monsters here are tier 4, I would be the weakest creature here if I had walked in at tier 3 strength, Sebastian murmured inside his head as he tried to calm his fast-beating heart. Sebastian studied the mysterious map, which indicated that the treasure he sought could be found within an ancient temple built by the necromancer god himself. The temple was about 30 minutes' walk from the area where he had landed, but Sebastian took a full 15 hours to cautiously move from creepy tree to approach the temple, as he made sure to not be dragged into any fights with the undead. Although his cowardly nature made him dread the idea of entering a necromantic temple, Sebastian couldn't ignore his intense desire to not be left behind in power by his talented friends. This was the only reason he forced himself to take this risk, rather than seeking the thrill of adventure. As he approached the temple, Sebastian's heart raced with anxiety. The eerie structure loomed before him, a bizarre amalgamation of opulence and decay. The temple's walls seemed to be made of a peculiar dark stone, adorned with intricate carvings depicting scenes of the necromancer god's numerous victories and conquests. The entrance was framed by towering, twisted columns, which were topped with grotesque gargoyles leering down at any who dared approach. Despite the oppressive atmosphere, the temple was also adorned with gold and silver accents, hinting at the vanity of the necromancer god who sought to be revered and admired in equal measure. Sebastian couldn't help but scoff at the temple's peculiar design. It was as if the deity had tried to blend grandiosity with a macabre aesthetic, resulting in a disconcerting, unsettling ambience. The necromancer god was a narcissistic idiot who has no sense for aesthetics, absolute fool, Sebastian said out loud as he tried to gather courage to enter the temple by cursing the one who built it. Finally reaching the entrance, Sebastian hesitantly stepped into the dimly lit temple, where he was immediately confronted by a colossal statue of the necromancer god who was seated right across the grand entrance on a throne-like seat. Its outstretched arms seemed to command the very forces of life and death, while its cold, imperious gaze pierced through him. Before he could react, the statue's eyes flared with a sinister light, and a deep, commanding voice echoed throughout the chamber, "Only necromancers may enter. Begone, weak thought." Caught off guard, Sebastian's cowardice took over. Instead of trying to fight the dark energy that erupted from the statue's eyes, he turned on his heels and ran as fast as he could out of the temple, narrowly escaping the deadly attack. "Oh fuck no," Sebastian commented as he had goosebumps all over his body from this near-death encounter. "Why does that statue move? It doesn't make any sense. You have been fucking dead for 1,000 years, can't you just leave behind an immovable statue like some normal god?" "Of course not. You just had to make a moving one with unparalleled fighting abilities that can detect whether the entrant is a necromancer-class practitioner or not." "How predictable," Sebastian cursed as he looked towards the heavens and balled his fists in anger. There was no way in hell that he was ever going to confront that idiotic statue head-on. He absolutely did not want to face its necromantic powers of doom in a pointless fight. There was no guarantee that this was the last trial that the necromancer had set to gain his treasure or not either. Maybe the sadistic pervert had set up a chain of trials that one needed to pass before gaining his treasure, but Sebastian had no intentions of playing his game. He was not going to give up on his quest to claim the necromancer's treasure, but he was going to find his own creative way to solve this problem, one that was in line with the way of the coward rather than facing the challenge head-on like some courageous MC. "Alright. I'm going to figure out the layout of this temple from the outside, figure out where the heck you made the treasure room and then dig a hole to enter that place directly. Fuck you and your trials. I'm gonna cheat my way through," Sebastian declared as he thought of his own unorthodox solution to the problem. Chapter 488 Tier 5 Test. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Listen to me well, boy, there is a difference between the tier promotion tests you have given up till now and the tier promotion test you are about to attempt today. The Tier 5 promotion test is essentially just a further extension of the Tier 4 promotion test. In Tier 4 the lightning helps reforge your bodily processes improve and you go from being a mortal to a demi-god. Your reactions are way faster, your ability to control destructive spells is higher and you become one of the very few people in the universe capable of reaching this stage, enough to call you an elite amongst a sea of commoners. The Tier 5 promotion test however is not about the physical but more about what's inside of you. Just like Tier 4 prepares your body for godhood, Tier 5 tempers your mind, comprehension and personality for godhood. You must transcend your own limitations, you must defeat your own deepest inner demons and have a clear objective in your mind. The Tier 5 promotion test is different for every individual, and the criteria for getting a SSS rating is also different for everyone. When you eventually trigger the test, just cling on to your identity strongly, think about your goals single-mindedly, and don't let the Queen manipulate you or your memories to depress you. There is no amount of preparation or skill that can prepare you for this promotion test. It's just you, your willpower and temperament now. Go do your best. Drax said in Max's mind as he felt that the time for the promotion test to trigger was growing closer. Max had been circulating mana for close to 23.5 hours now, and his breathing and emotions had stabilized completely, which was a prerequisite to triggering the test. O.org The test could start any moment now, and this would be one of those tests where he would not be physically present with Max to guide him, hence, advising him beforehand. Drax tried to provide him with the best guidance that he could. System notification. You have met the conditions to undertake the Tier 5 promotion test. Are you willing to start the test now? Yes, no. Max mentally selected yes, and instantly he felt his consciousness pulled out of his body, just like when Angakok took over his physical body, but instead of being teleported into a white space of nothingness, Max was teleported to a place he was all too familiar with. His home back on Earth, in his old room. System notification. Beginning the first trial, the test to conquer the heart demon. Good luck, adventurer. Max saw the system notification and he felt his body finally assimilate into something solid, as he felt heavy and unusually drowsy for some reason. As he tried to get up from his bed of his old room, he realized that he could not get up no matter how hard he tried, which is when he took a good hard look at his own body and realized that he was back to being the fat chubby government worker that he once was, and no longer had a Tier 4 body. Max's emotions were calm. He knew this was not real, that his actual body was that of a powerful adventurer, and this was just the system trying to play tricks on him. You can't rattle Max Rajput like that, you need to do better, Max commented as he took a moment to adjust to his old body and stood up from his bed with great difficulty. It was a funny feeling for Max to be trapped in his old body, as it was something of an eye-opener for him. When he tried to sense his body, he felt that all of his muscles were lumped into one and he could not clearly feel the distinction between them. Having gone gradually from Tier 0 to Tier 4, he could never appreciate the complete change his body had underwent tier after tier, but now that he was suddenly back to being trash, he understood just how much he had improved. In his Tier 4 body he could clearly feel all his muscles. Contracting his arm was not just a process of using the bicep muscle as a whole, but he could feel the short head and the long head distinctly alongside the contraction of his forearms, his back muscles and his shoulders. He could feel every single muscle fiber in great length at Tier 4 and could exploit each strain to its maximum potential, but he could hardly feel his own body at Tier 0. It was like being heavily sedated and crippled, a feeling that could break his morale completely if he knew that it was going to be something permanent. Ha! This just makes me proud, I've come a long way. Max said with a smile on his face as he was feeling very good about the trial, but his emotions went into a turmoil when he heard a familiar voice knock on his door. Max, knock knock. Max, can I come in? The voice asked politely as Max could feel his heart rate spike. Instinctively he clutched his second heart only to realize it was no longer present in his body. Yeah, he said calmly, reminding himself that this was all just an illusion as his brother opened the door and walked into the room with both Jake and Amy on his shoulders. When Max looked at the smiling face of his brother, his emotional state was thrown into a mess. He knew perfectly well that this wasn't real and he wanted to behave normally. But it was simply impossible for him to see the person that he loved probably the most in the universe being back from the dead in front of him and not feel his heart flutter at the sight. God was witness to the nights that Max had woken up from nightmares where his brother gave him advice about life and combat. About the countless hours that he felt a heaviness in his chest when he thought about how unjustly his brother was killed and how his killer was roaming scot-free in the universe. Maybe it was the Queen manipulating his emotions, or maybe all the feelings that he had repressed for so long were springing back up, as Max was unable to utter a single word while looking at his brother playing happily with his two children. "I've missed you, brother," Max muttered in his mind as he closed his eyes and tried to dry the tears that had unexpectedly formed inside his pupils. Chapter 489 Guilt. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Today is a celebration, brother. Both Jake and Amy have managed to reach Tier 1, Rudra said as he stroked the heads of both kids who were smiling innocently towards their uncle. "Is that so?" "Well done," Max said, his voice cracking a little as he realized the reality behind the situation. Had he not failed to save Rudra's kids in real life when the New Year's attack happened, this might have been the reality he would be living in. His brother would be alive and the family unit would be intact, with both kids shining and showing their true potential. "Uncle Max, now I can train with you. You are also at Tier 1, we can spar daily," Jake said with a competitive fire in his eyes as Max could not help but chuckle seeing his emotion. Had he really been a Tier 1 fighter, he would have felt insulted by this comment, but because he was not, he could just look at it as if it were the antics of a child and smile. "Sure, Jake, we can do that, pal," Max said as a bright smile formed on the kid's face as well as that of Rudra's. "Go out, kids, let me and your uncle have a talk in peace," Rudra said as he instructed Jake and Amy to leave the room as his smile finally dropped after they left and he took a seat on Max's study chair. "I'm trying to find a cure for your mana insensitivity, Max. There is this artifact that can increase one's sensitivity to mana 1,000-fold. It's forged by the Forger King himself and is worth a few 100 billion gold coins. I do have that kind of funds in total, but it's for the betterment of Earth and not my personal funds, which is why I can't use it. But what I can do is obtain the necessary funds in the next 3.6 months and buy the item for you. Don't worry, brother. I'll do my best to help you push past your limitations. The kids won't surpass you. Don't worry," Rudra said with brotherly affection as Max could not help but feel his airway choke up. The conversation was borderline poisonous for him as he had to try extremely hard to not cry. This was precisely the kind of support his brother had given him throughout his life. Never asked for a thing, never stopped him from pursuing his dreams, yet tried his hardest to support him without asking for anything in return. He was the only one apart from his parents who had loved him unconditionally, and with him dying there would never be anyone else in this universe to do the same for him. Max was a strong man when it came to taking abuse. He could withstand sitting in poison baths, having his bones broken and his limbs ripped off without shedding a tear. However, he was weak to unconditional love. When his brother said these words, he felt a tear escape his eye as a fog of realization hit him. The reason behind him choking up today was not because the Queen was showing him a difficult vision of his brother, but because seeing him once again made Max realize just how selfish he really was. Ever since he had reincarnated, everything was about him. It was always his dreams, his ambitions, his feelings that had mattered the most, and although he did feel a burning anger about his brother's death, there was nothing that he actually did to avenge him. The excuse he had for himself was that he was not strong enough. That he was not strong enough to oppose Lucifer and needed to bide his time, but the truth of the matter was that if he wanted to, he could have always created problems for Lucifer's minions, actively disrupted his trade and picked fights with underlings of Lucifer that he could handle to slowly but surely make the life of the devil difficult. He could have done all that and more if he was dead set on revenge, but the truth was that despite his brother only selflessly giving him everything forever, when the time had come to avenge him, Max had chosen to focus on his own dreams rather than do what was right. He was selfish. From a young age he had only taken from everyone, but now that he was slowly in the position to give back, was he willing to do so? "Why are you crying? Your brother is a god, money is nothing to me," Rudra said nonchalantly as he patted Max on the head just like he did to the kids, his consolation inducing a poison of guilt in Max's heart that was way worse than any poison bath he had ever taken. He hardly visited Naomi and Ruby and the kids after Rudra's demise. Although he loved him in his own way, he was never around to teach his nephews and niece the rights and wrongs of this universe. He was not around to teach them combat, or play catch with them, and he was not there for his sisters-in-law who were lonely after their husband's demise. There was always a good excuse for him as to why he could not spend time back home, there was always something urgent in his life. Let alone taking revenge for his brother, Max had not even taken care of his brother's family like he should have after all that his brother had done for him. He prided himself in the Rajput name, he prided himself in being the brother of Shikuni the Terrifying, but when push came to shove and it was time to be the less glamorous and family-oriented version of the Rajput that he was, Max was never there to fulfill his obligations. Somewhere deep down he was always aware of this, however, he had repressed this feeling up till today and had never confronted it. Now that he could run away from it no more, he was forced to face the consequences of the actions he had taken over the course of 2 lifetimes. /////A/N Bonus chapter for hitting the GT target, good job everyone. I don't expect much from this month, a top 10 finish in the rankings is enough. I will do a 5-chapter mass release on June 1st if we do /////. Chapter 490 Deepest Regret. You are listening at novelfull.audio. I'm sorry brother, I have failed you, Max said with a heavy voice as a steady stream of tears ran down his eyes. The familiar scent of his brother's body, doubled with his calm presence and affection, was too much for Max to handle against his own inner guilt as he finally broke down into tears and hugged his own brother, knowing full well that this was all an illusion. It's fine Max, it's really just some small sums of money, it's not something to cry over about, Rudra said as he embraced Max tightly and tried to provide his brother with some much-needed warmth. For a full 5 minutes, Max let his emotions get the best of him as he accepted the fact that he had indeed failed his brother, but at the same time, instead of blaming himself for being a horrible person, he decided to confront it like a man as he looked at his brother in the eyes and said firmly, I shall not fail you again brother. In the future, I promise that come what may, I'll put this family before everything, including my own ambitions. Rudra raised an eyebrow over this comment as he chuckled and said, you don't have to sacrifice anything Max. Until I'm here the sky won't fall. There is no need to look after the family, I'm enough to support you all. Just be happy, that's all I want for you. Be a painter if you want to be, or a fighter if that gives you happiness. Heck, you can just be a good person in general and I'll be happy and proud of you. So stop crying and man up. The kids deserve to be taken out to the arcade today, but I'm busy with some work. Why don't you take them out instead? Max felt even worse when he heard this. He wanted to say, what if you are not around anymore, but could not bring himself to utter those words. Embracing his brother once again tightly, he further emboldened his resolve to be a changed man when he went back to reality, and that he would keep his family before his ambitions, just how his brother had all his life. Sure, I'll take them out, Max said as he wiped his tears off and waited for Rudra to leave before he changed his clothes and went down to pick up the kids. It was weird for him to see so much fat on his body. He had incredibly weak muscles, a bad physique and weak bones. He could not understand how he thought that with such a weak body he could still win any bar fight he got himself into just because he had unshaking willpower. As he went down to pick up the kids, he looked at a lively Naomi kissing his brother passionately as her face turned red from all the public display of affection when she realized that he was watching. Usually the old Max would have turned away and let the couple have their peace, but to this Max it just felt so nostalgic and wholesome that he could not take his eyes off. Even though it was an illusion, it was a good memory for him. Holding both kids with one palm each, Max walked out of the Rajput mansion on Earth within the Upside as he walked towards the entertainment district with both of them in tow. Earth itself was a nostalgic memory, the polluted air and the precise gravity was something he cherished a lot after traveling to so many hideous planets in the universe. His heart was in a bitter-sweet mood from what had happened earlier, as his mind was clouded with scenarios that could have been if he did not choose to live his second life in the pursuit of power, but rather just as a normal human who was content in being a government worker. Maybe his brother would never have to have faced Thor, maybe his family life would be filled with joy and love, and maybe it would have been a more fulfilling life than the bone-breaking, monster-slaying adventure that he was currently on. He had never appreciated Earth before, never understood that despite being a crappy planet overall, it was home, something that could never be replaced. Walking with the happy kids as they jumped unnecessarily from time to time and giggled made Max feel an indescribable happiness in his heart which was also the source of some guilt. He could not understand if the life that he was currently living and the power that he was so desperately chasing really worth it in the end. Boom boom boom. Just as Max was wondering all this, 3 explosions sent him spiraling backwards as he was suddenly ambushed on the streets. He felt his ears ringing and his ribs hurting as he struggled to move around even a little. "Jake, Amy, are you all right?" Max said with a slurred speech as he desperately tried to find the kids. Debris and fire was all around him, but for some reason no police drones were dispatched nor was his brother here by now. Jake was hit badly by some rock and was profusely bleeding from his head while a pole had fell on Amy's leg who was crying inconsolably from her leg being broken. "Don't worry kids, Uncle Max is here," Max said with a raspy voice as he willed himself to get up as he pushed his weak body towards Amy first, trying to get to her to help lift the pole that was crushing her leg. It was at this moment, Max saw some very familiar figures growling and closing in on him as he could absolutely not believe his eyes. Rage, hatred, anger and an indescribable amount of raw emotion erupted in Max's heart when he saw those despicable bunch of werewolves. The same bastards that had taken Jake and Amy on the last night of his first life. Rick. Harry. Max spoke the names of the 2 werewolves in the pack whose names he remembered from the attack and were the object of a lot of his hate and rage over the years. "Ho ho, the weak human knows of our names," Harry the wolf, the one who had gouged out his eyes before his death, said as he bared his ugly sharp teeth at Max. "Uncle Max," Amy shouted in distress as she was terrified of what was happening, her shrill cry waking up Jake who shuddered in fear from scanning his surroundings. Max, who saw the horrified expression on the face of the kids, felt his deepest regret being stirred as he said with an unsure-sounding voice, "Don't worry kids, Uncle Max will protect you." // bonus chapter for hitting the PS target. Thank you all for the support //